Deebo Samuel traded
Yeah.
to the Washington Commandos.
Yeah, 5th round pick is what their Niners are getting back. Obviously, the contract is made it tougher to trade, and so the return was not going to be as good. Even though he only had about 1 year left.
Yeah.
Last year,
I'm watching the YouTube feed and I just saw the Deebo in the Commander jersey. Rough.
Yeah.
Oof. I don't like that.
Yeah, it's not fun. Not fun. It's for me, I think about how much he dropped off last year, even like when he was basically the only guy left. And I think about that, and I think about getting a 5th round pick, and I think about the money he's going to be making on this final year of his contract. And I think it's probably in the end an even trade. Like as much as I hate to say it, if he does return back to glory, or anything close to it, if he makes like any step better than what he did last year, then the Commanders are getting a really, really great player. And Deebo was great for quite a few years for the Niners, but he did take quite a beating, especially when he was doing all the running back stuff too. And if he's able to get back to form, good for him. Glad he could, maybe make some more money after this next season. But I just I get it, and I think 5th round is probably about the right compensation. I would have preferred a 2nd rounder or something, obviously, but I don't think that the market was there for that. That ask.
Yeah, I agree.
I haven't heard anything different, but I suspect a 5th round was probably the best they could get.
Yeah.
At this point, and they knew they had to move him. So
well, there was talks that they were trying to, and I can't remember the kid's name, but there was talks that they might trade, Commanders trade a defensive player was thrown into that trade mix, and it looked like that was kiboshed there at the last second. So I don't know. I think a 5th is right, but it does feel pretty shallow, right? It feels like maybe you could have got a 3rd or 4th.
There is a real possibility that he ends up being worth a 3rd, like he could have been worth a 3rd or a 2nd round pick, if he returns back to what he was doing a couple years ago. If he doesn't, then the Niners kind of got a steal. If Deebo's is washed, then the Niners win this trade,
Right.
That's for a 5th round pick. And obviously we don't know for sure who the Niners end up picking. And that's, it could end up being a wash either way, it's just, we don't know. It's the known versus the unknown, right? Especially with a 5th round pick. You could get a George Kittle, or you could get somebody who has the career that I had in the NFL, which is not at all. So you don't know, especially with later round, last day picks, 5th or 7th round. It is a crapshoot, especially when you get that far into the draft. So, yeah, man, it is what it is. I knew that they were going to have to move on at some point, and there we go. I don't know what else to say.
Well, now I really hope
I was reading that Brandon Ayuk is also being shopped.
They're asking questions, I think, and I think some teams might be, asking as well. Like I said, Ricky Pearsall, wide receiver 1, was what I texted back to you guys when we talked about it. So I think this is, and because Ricky Pearsall did have the that one game where he went off, he flashed, he showed me something that I needed to see from him. I'm going to operate under the assumption that he's not going to get shot in the offseason. And
do you think that if the 49ers were to trade Ayuk, that possibly puts your GM on the hot seat, knowing that we did this contract and it was just an absolute dud?
Not necessarily. No. John Lynch has there's been some questionable moves, but every GM has questionable moves. I think by and large, him and Shanahan are on the same page. And Jed York was there when the GM and the head coach were not on the same page. And as long as the Niners, the only way that John Lynch is on the hot seat is if they have a losing season again from the players that he sent away, and those players end up being good still. So that's what you look at. If Javon Hargrave signs somewhere else and is able to bounce back and be good, if Deebo has a bounce back season, if Ayuk does get traded and he comes back from this knee injury and looks every bit the all pro that he was trending to be beforehand, then it does start to look a little bit bad, but I wouldn't say hot seat. No, like that at worst, I think that puts John Lynch going into the next season, into the 2026 season, looking over his shoulder a little bit. Like the seat starts to get warm at that point. This season, no hot seat at all.
Gotcha.
Not now.
Unless they start off like 0-7 or like something ridiculous.
If they are like ridiculously terrible, like like Sam said, 0-7. If they're like 2-9 or something like that, like that. Then sure, okay, then absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think about? Do you think the 49ers are going to make a run at somebody like Davante Adams?
They might. The wide receiver draft class is not as deep, as they're saying this year. So I think as it was last year, just all the draft experts are saying like the running backs are where it's at this year, more so than the wide receivers. But they're still they'll probably take a wide receiver at some point. And obviously they're going to have to fill in wide receiver somewhere. And if they're able to get Davante Adams for, fairly cheap, I think because Deebo's contract is like, that'd be dead money on the Niners. Ayuk would be dead money on the Niners as well if he gets traded, right? Davante Adams' dead money is somewhere else, right? Like that's on the Raiders, I think maybe it's the Jets. I'm not entirely sure.
It's on the Jets.
It's on the Jets. Well, at that point, like if the Jets are paying for it, then it's pretty cheap for the Niners to bring him in, and it just then becomes a question of does he want to play here,
right.
And can the Niners make a trade happen that the Jets would be willing to accept, it gets down into the nitty gritty of.
I think if nobody offers the Jets anything, I think he just gets released because he's not going to want to be there.
That's the report that I saw is that they're looking for a trade partner. He might get released otherwise.
What about another name at you? What about Cooper Kupp? Would you roll the dice on bringing a third wide receiver in Cooper Kupp?
Cooper Kupp, I think you can kick the tires on Cooper Kupp. See what's happening there. There's Cooper Kupp was made because of Matt Stafford, though. Matt Stafford has gotten a lot of wide receivers paid. Like hell, Kenny Golladay got that massive contract from the Giants and did nothing with it for his entire career in the Giants. But because he was so excellent with Matthew Stafford throwing him the ball, that's what happens, So I'm a little bit curious how much of Cooper Kupp is a Matthew Stafford creation, and that's the kind of questions you have to ask. Can Brock Purdy get something akin to what Matthew Stafford was getting out of him, and a poor man's version of Matthew Stafford? Obviously, right now we're still in, he's still young in his career. I'm not trying to have him, resurrect. A freaking Megatron or nothing, I'm not looking at that right now, but that's what you're asking then is could Cooper Kupp do that? Could you saw Juwan Jennings step up last year when Deebo wouldn't or couldn't, so does Juwan Jennings keep that going? Does Ricky Pearsall make the next step?
I think Juwan Jennings is like he's definitely your third wide receiver.
He's the
like the Jacoby Myers.
The Jacoby Myers
is just solid.
The Rashad Batemans, he's that guy.
Solid.
He's Linus's blankets is what he is, for Brock Purdy. That's so yeah.
No, awesome. Any more thoughts on 49ers news?
That's all I got for now, man.
Right on.
Just a quick,
Yeah, Vince, take us through some of the transactions of the NFL. I see there's been some.
Yeah, there's a couple in here. The Bills gave wide receiver Khalil Shakir a 4-year, $60.2 million extension, $32 million guaranteed. he ended up being the guy who more or less stepped up into the wide receiver one over this past season when Diggs and the other wide receiver that ended up in Jacksonville they left. They lost 2 wide receivers. I can't remember the dude's name. He was an all or nothing guy. Anyway, so Khalil Shakir stepped up, and now they're paying him as such for stepping up. And I think that they'll probably make another run at a different wide receiver as well to try to bolster that a bit more too.
He was a former Eagle wide receiver. He was drafted. I forgot he was with the Eagles. Now he gets to wear fun uniforms and walk around
Davis
barefoot.
is who I was trying to think of. God damn it.
Yeah, so now he gets to wear like his odd uniforms or costumes and be shoeless walking into Buffalo in sub-freezing weather. So that's awesome. Oh, that is Hollins. That's right. That's
Mac
right.
Hollins.
Yeah. Oh, well, good.
All right,
hey, man,
speaking
we're
of
always
the Eagles,
for to get your bag, you know?
Yeah. Speaking of the Eagles, your boys are releasing Darius Slay. If it's a post June 1st release, they're going to save $4.3 million against the cap.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, hey, thank you. He got a ring with us, 2 Super Bowl appearances, 6-time Pro Bowler. If he, there's talks that he might come back to the Eagles at a lesser deal. If that's the case, great. I'll be more than happy to have him back. But, he did what he came here to do. He was going to leave last year. He was going to go to the Ravens. And apparently Dom, our security guy, called him and told him he needs to run it back with us one more time. I don't know what Dom does. He's just the guy that, he makes moves and people listen to what he says.
He's the senior director of vibes, I guess. He's got the Joe Thornton job.
Yeah.
But with Philly, with the Eagles.
I don't know exactly what he does. I mean, I know his job is to protect, the star players and the coaches. But, apparently Dom called him and Darius said, okay, I'll run it back one more time. And it paid off for a Super Bowl. So all power to him, whatever he wants to do. If he wants to go chase that bag somewhere else, go for it. If you want to come back and try to run it back one more time with us, go for it. It's up to you, bud.
Right on. The other note is Matt Stafford does end up staying with the Rams. What are the Raiders going to do about this?
Thank God.
Take that decision off of your plate, right?
Yeah. I mean, I just really wanted to talk about one. I never thought he was going to the Raiders. It just did not make any sense. The way I see this played out is if the Raiders did talk to Stafford, Tom Brady, it was rumored that they talked. And the way I see it is Tom Brady goes, "Hey Matt, how much do you want? I want $50 million a year guaranteed for 2 years." Okay, yeah, we'll do that. And that's as far as it went. I don't think the Rams were going to trade him unless they got a first round pick, and you're not trading a first round pick for Matt Stafford this year or next year when you're a team that's more than just a quarterback away.
Yeah.
They need more draft picks. So from a draft capital standpoint, it did not make sense. The other thing that didn't make sense is the Raiders are still extremely popular in Los Angeles and SoCal. So the Rams are going to trade their Super Bowl winning quarterback to the Raiders. That's telling the fan base to go be a fan of the Raiders.
You will see plenty. You would have seen plenty of Matt Stafford Raiders jerseys
immediately.
Immediately. All over LA County.
To me, it just
Anaheim.
did not make any sense that this would happen. And I'm glad that the Raiders, didn't overpay. I think a name that I'm interested in is actually New England's quarterback, Joe Milton III. The dude has probably the strongest bazooka arm in the NFL. Last year was his rookie year. Maybe it was his second year, but he's still relatively young. But I think that's what the direction the Raiders need to do is, maybe you take a quarterback in this draft, you trade for a quarterback, and you keep Aiden O'Connell, and maybe you bring in a couple of quarterbacks via free agency just to have arms and let the best man win. I don't think you're winning the Super Bowl this coming year with Matt Stafford or someone else. You got to build the roster. So I'm really glad they didn't overpay for this trade because I don't think he was going to put the Raiders over the top. They're not there yet. So.
Yeah, I think the Raiders' key thing is build the line. If you're not going to get a quarterback, build a line. And I would say, agree to disagree if you don't believe what I'm saying here, but I think if you could build a good O-line, you could probably attract a top quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, you might not have to go and get one out of a draft and develop one. Maybe you do get a solid quarterback who's looking to get a new home, and he looks at that O-line. Maybe that they think that they're the piece to take the Raiders over the top.
No, I agree. I mean, to be a really good football team, you always got to start at the trenches, whether that's the D line or the O line, you always got to start in the trench. Mm-hmm. And that's why, like, at number 6, I look at it like if Mason Graham fell to you and you put Mason Graham next to Max Crosby and the free agent from Miami, he got hurt. I'm blanking on his name. Oh, great radio, Sam. The defensive tackle.
Right, Tyler, you got to forget a player's name next.
Vince made it contagious. The defensive tackle from Miami, and they signed him, Christian Wilkins.
There you go. Out of bed.
So they got Christian Wilkins next to Mason Graham and Max Crosby. And if you can bring Malcolm Kuntz back, I mean, that's a hell of a defensive line. If you're able to get an offensive tackle, the best offensive lineman in the draft, that's going to anchor your offense hopefully for the next 10 years. That's a win too. But anything on the line, I would be absolutely ecstatic for, because that's where you have to build first. That's where you always have to be solid. And the Raiders need to win the draft in the mid rounds where they're picking up guards and roster depth guys. That's why Philadelphia has been the best roster over the years. It's great that they were able to bring in a Saquon Barkley, but they constantly and consistently hit in the mid rounds. You should be getting a good player in the first round. I know Jalen Carter fell to them, but he was, you should hit on a top 10, top 12 pick. That should be a good pick. But they've really nailed it in the later rounds, and that's what the Raiders need to do. They're not going to get it all in one pick. So I agree with you, man. Build the trenches, and you can add along the way.
Yeah, I mean, there's also talks that I don't believe this for a second, but I love the freedom of journalism when they're in this off season. But there's talks that the Eagles are trying to acquire Myles Garrett here, so we'll see if that actually happens here. I think the league will immediately put letters to ban the Eagles GM for ever talking to any other team ever again.
Yeah, Howie Roseman has to. Oh, but he has to communicate through sign language going forward to make any trades happen.
Yeah.